Right, I'd like to welcome my guest today, Alan Howell, to the podcast. Alan, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what your business does.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Jamie. So my name's Alan Howell. You're right there. My company is My Property Claim. So as it says on my shirt there. What do we do? So we manage building insurance claims, but on behalf of the insurance policyholder. So take, for instance, if a policyholder, a homeowner, has a building insurance claim, generally they'll make a claim against their insurer, and the insurer will appoint a loss adjuster who's, when you think about it, they're working on behalf of the insurer, and they will do anything they can to keep the cost down as low as possible. So that's the loss adjuster's role.
I don't think I'd ever heard of a loss assessor until I met you.
No,
probably
so
10 years
loss
ago.
assessor is the person who's on the other side of the fence. So we work on behalf of the policyholder making the claim. So obviously, what's our focus? It's basically to protect the interests of the policyholder making their claim, and we make sure that we fight to get their costs, etc., where they should be. So everything that they're legally entitled to under the terms and conditions of the policy.
Yeah.
So that's what we try to do.
The bits that nobody reads, the terms and conditions.
Well, yes, and that's always the big thing that really annoys me is the fact that, can I talk about Martin's money tips?
Yep.
I mean, I really like the program and I like a lot of the stuff that he says. But what really annoys me is when he talks about insurance products, because they talk about, just go on the internet, have a look at that furry ferret website and then get the cheapest quote that you can. The problem is with a building insurance policy, it's got a lot of bells and whistles and you don't know what you've not chosen when you've bought the product on cost alone. You can't just go for the cheapest product, because I find that when people go in and make a claim, they've never claimed before in their life. This is the first time they've had major loss, and they find out they don't have trace and access, which means who's going to find the problem to even confirm to the insurance company that we do have a problem, or they don't have alternative accommodation. They don't have things like matching pairs and sets. These are all things that you really need to understand in a policy and know what sort of risk you're accepting by not including them in the policy.
Most of us just look at the price, the headline figure, and what the excess is going to be in case something happens.
You cannot buy an insurance policy for a property in that way.
So insurance is a really complicated market. There's lots of moving parts to most policies. How did you get into doing work in insurance? Were you kind of poacher turned gamekeeper now, or did you have a background in insurance beforehand?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was spammed into it. So I've been in telecoms and telecom manufacturing all my life. So when I left school, I did radio, TV and electronics. I went into a company called Plessy, which I don't even think exists anymore. I was a trainee installation commissioning engineer with telephone exchanges. Yeah. So I did a lot of telephone installation, commissioning, handover to telecom. I've also worked for a company called ERG in Western Australia, which was to do with telecoms as well. They were selected by Nokia to design and manufacture base station equipment for the mobile phones out in Telecom Australia and in Bell South and New Zealand. So I was with them, and then I came back to the UK in '98, and I came back to a job in Nokia. So I was working in Nokia. So I've always been in telecoms, in corporate, and it was only when I was made redundant for the third time in my life, back in 2012 when Nokia went down. I was looking for work at that stage. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had quite a few months off because we had a good redundancy package, etc. So I wasn't in any panic. But I did know even 12 months before I left Nokia, because that's how much notice we were given that it was going to happen.
Yeah. So was it the end of a project, or was it the business unit was being sold?
So because of the fact I was a line manager at that stage, I had to take all of my engineers, etc., through redundancy discussion before it was my turn. And so Nokia really put a lot of money into this, and you could make a decision as to which way you wanted to go. I chose start my own business because, third time being made redundant, let me do it myself.
And you had a young family, and you've been through that.
In fact, my youngest my youngest had just reached the age whereby he was making a decision for university and that sort of thing. So
so the pressure, there was less pressure.
There was less pressure. There was less pressure. So I took some time to look at what I wanted to do. I thought, well, if it's going to be my first attempt at starting my own business, let's go for something that's going to give me that initial support. And I thought, yeah, franchise might be a good idea. So I went to some of the franchise association meetings. And I guess it was there where I probably left my details. Yeah. And then maybe a few weeks later, I got some email back, which was from this company called Concept Building Solutions. Never heard of them.
Yeah.
And
I was not a high street brand, not like buying a Subway or McDonald's franchise.
They're based up in Preston, I think it was. And I think the company was more well known up north anyway. But again, you wouldn't know about them unless you were making a building insurance claim and then somebody found you.
So you'd been there managing teams of engineers. Engineers are not the easiest people to manage at the best of time. Yeah. Communication's always a little bit of a challenge and things like that. So did you know that you wanted to have a business with staff, or you wanted to kind of have a streamlined business? What was your kind of vision?
So I looked at a number of options. I was looking even for sale signs, which was talking about getting multiple vans on the road, etc. But as I say, I got this email. It was a spam email from this company called Concept Building Solutions. And what caught my eye was when I did a comparison between my soft skills now. So it's a case of managing things like managing staff. It will be with Nokia. It was managing people like, software engineers, hardware engineers, systems engineers, etc. So it was all about managing projects and managing staff in different departments to pull together a project to a satisfactory conclusion. And when I went through the pitch that was in this email for this company, Concept Building Solutions, I'm thinking, actually, it's a totally different environment. But if I was to cross out systems engineer, software engineer, and hardware engineer, and put structural engineer, builder, plasterer, painter, I'm thinking, well, it's exactly the same.
Because a lot of your role had been quality control, quality assurance, processes.
Exactly. Processes, quality assurance, exactly. Yeah. And so it was just a case of, instead of dealing with this group of experts, professionals, it was dealing with these expert professionals and trades, etc.
Do you think that brings a different level of respect for those people you're working with now? Because rather than going from a white collar role to working with blue collar roles, stereotyping things, you were used to working with people in a professional capacity, and you now treat the trades with the same level of professionalism and respect that you probably had in Nokia. So you get a slightly different result from people.
I'd say, how would I answer that? The fact that I was born and raised in Stoke-on-Trent means I probably knew more blue-collar workers and trades. My parents both worked in pot banks. I had relatives who worked in coal mines. So that was my background. That was my heritage. I even spent a lot of my school holidays playing or working in pot banks because my mum would take me into work. So I don't think I've ever had a lack of respect for those sort of people.
But a lot of people that come from that corporate environment are used to used to having people to do stuff for them, and whereas you were kind of used to rubbing shoulders with the workers, and you kind of bring that approach to the partnerships.
I don't tend to put people in those sort of categories. So people are what they are, and you're going to need to sort of mix with all types of people and use all types of products and services. I mean, it's like the guy who came to one of your Farnham dues this week. What is he now? He's a welder.
Welder and blacksmith, background in aerospace engineering. Yeah.
So who knows what they're going to choose to do? Yeah. People always go through different parts of their life where they think, I've had enough of all this pressure with, all this corporate stuff, which is what I did. Not that my job was ever that high pressured, but it's a case if you come to a certain point in life where you want to make a different life choice, you want to do a different thing. You've got different drivers.
You're in control of different things. Yeah.
Exactly.
I've always said that with in your early 20s, it's all about money, setting up a house, nesting, starting a family, all those types of things. And everybody's motivation can change from week to week depending on what happens in your life. And so you got to this stage where your motivation is, I need to not be made redundant again. I need to carve out my own little niche in the world, and starting this business with the support of a franchise was going to be the territory from kind of 2012, 2013 onwards. So you looked at this franchise. What was you said you were looking for support from a franchise. So what were the things that you were concerned about starting a business?
Well, I guess I'd never done anything about running my own business. I can't even think of any of my relatives that ran their own business, to be honest. So I didn't have a blueprint on what to do. And again, probably having that quality and process background, I knew I would have to have something in place to make sure I've got this roadmap of what I need to do, what I need to achieve. And as I say, it's a case of the offer that came from Concept just seemed to be the right thing.
Tick the boxes.
It just ticked all the boxes, and it looked like something that I had the capability of doing when you look at all of the actual work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
But it's a case of dealing with insurance companies. How do I put together schedules for repair? How do I find out about things like, obviously you've got mitigation work that needs to be carried out when you're handling building insurance claims. It's not just a case of rebuilding a wall or repainting the wall and redecorating. You've got all mitigation things and risk assessments that need to be done. You've got things like asbestos. I mean, who knew there was asbestos not only in Artex but also in Marley floor tiles?
Yeah. And right down to toilet cisterns and all sorts of things.
Exactly.
Underneath the sinks.
It's all over the place. So you need to be aware of that. You need to understand how to dry buildings. So how do you dehumidify things? How do you, if it's a fire damage claim, what processes do you need? What tools, techniques do you need for SUT removal?
So not just that we've got to learn how to run a business, how to bring the customers in, but there's a massive learning curve that if you've got no background or family background in building, then, it was a...
Well, the thing is, I've always been keen on DIY, and I like to think I'm fairly logical. I can work things out.
Yeah.
So I can do stuff. I can turn my hand to anything like that. I like using my hands, even though I've always been in corporate. I like using my hands. So I didn't have so much of a concern about that. It's the things like, what do I need to know that I don't know now?
Because in a way, your job role, you effectively become a surveyor in a lot of detail. So you have to learn about building methodologies and how things are put together.
Yeah.
Because you can't just rely on the honesty or skill of a subcontractor or a builder or...
Well, I mean, the thing is, what I did, again, this is what we got great treatment from Nokia in the last stage when we were sort of coming towards redundancy, and I used my time wisely. As I say, I went out and did things like the franchise association presentations during work time.
Yeah.
I also did electrical qualifications again, so I did the Part P and all of that. I just didn't continue with that. So I understand electrical circuits, and through electrics. I also
that was an easy one for you because you were background in technical.
I'd done it sort of before anyway. When I left school, I just didn't take the exams like I did this time around. I also did Prince 2 again, project management. And I did a taster in plumbing. I did a taster in plastering. Yeah. So I sort of did a bit of tradey stuff as well, just to get that understanding that I thought I probably would need.
Like everything, knowing some of the terminology, knowing some of the tools, knowing some of the techniques, it brings a whole different aspects to managing things. Yeah. And also, the people you're talking to and engaging, they know not to spin. Spin stuff at you. That's the polite way of putting it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when builders and that, and when they start saying that now, I think they can see the funny look coming on, and then they go, "Okay, you caught me out."
So what happened training wise from the franchise point of view? Did they just give you a load of manuals and a day in an office, or what did that initial start as a franchisee look
like? So what happened is you went up to their head office. You get the tour of the head office, you get to see the call centre, etc. You get to see the systems and how the systems work in the background, the CRM systems and all of that. and they will take you through all of the technical aspects that you need to know, the things that you need to understand, how to set up your business, all of the things that you need, like from an FCA compliance perspective, how do you do all of that? But once you've got all of that done, then they put you with an existing franchisee.
Okay. So you've got a buddy along the way
Yes.
to be a mentor.
So I spent probably another 4 or 5 days with 2 different operators, franchisees in Liverpool, and so you spend time with them, shadowing them, seeing what they do and how they do it. In fact, before I left the franchise a few years ago now, because I was then one of the people who've been around for quite a while, quite successful, I was being used by the franchise to buddy people who were down in the south. So I probably had about 6 people who spent time with me during the last few years I was with the franchise. And so I was doing exactly the same thing for them.
So that gives you a good grounding to get started from. One of the things I've always looked at when starting a business is the frequency of how often a customer will come and buy from me. The more times they buy from me, the easier marketing is. Yeah. But the other thing I like to do is things that are reasonably predictable. As you know, my background was electrical safety, and people had to have electrical safety checks done on a regular basis. So once you build that client base up, you've got regular routine business, and it's very easy to scale a business. You get to the end of your training, and we've got a business that's really inspired by God. It's probably not a term you use in your marketing very often, but it's acts of God that you're kind of dealing with: burst pipes, weather events, car accidents, all these kind of things. Week 1 of Alan sitting in his home office with his laptop looking for his first customer. How did you go out and find that first claim to manage? Because that's got to be the most difficult piece to actually start with, bringing in the customers and becoming known.
It for me, again, because of the fact that I was in no rush, I didn't have a lot of pressure because I got the redundancy, etc. So I didn't have any issues like that, and I was quite lucky. And the other thing. The other reason why I was lucky is that I bought into the franchise when it was the lowest price it had ever been.
Yep.
And Nokia actually, providing you set up a limited company before your last day in Nokia, they gave you another £10,000 startup grant, which coincidentally covered the cost.
First few months of...
Well, it actually covered the cost of the franchise.
Fantastic.
Which...
So Nokia was a really good ethical employer to take care of you and help you on your way, not just here you're being redundant, don't turn up at the office next week. They really supported
if all
you
redundancies, what do they always say about Carlsberg? all good redundancies would be that way.
Yeah.
No, it was fantastic. And it was a case of, if I had thought every redundancy after that would be the same, then maybe I'd just stay in corporate and say, oh, come on, make me redundant.
So do you remember what your first claim was?
Yes. It was a kitchen fire damage claim. I went live in December 2012. And my first paycheck, if you like, from finishing a claim was in the following April. So it was a few months. Yeah. It was a few months. But in terms of what I did for marketing, I mean, the franchisor told me there's only 2 things you need to do, Alan. They said, number 1, go and shed loads of money with Yellow Pages, Yell.com.
Yeah.
And they said, you want a full colour ad, maybe half a page, and VIP status with your...
Be seen wherever you're going to be.
Yeah. And that was costing anywhere between £5,000 and £6,000 a year.
Yep.
Did that work? Yes, it did. It did work. So it paid for itself. But the other thing that they told me is you need to go and find your local BNI, Business Network and International chapter. But they gave me a spreadsheet list of all of the types of businesses I would need to see in the room.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, not just where to go, but these are the people you're going to need to meet along the way.
Exactly, because when you think about it, when you're starting a new business, you've got to understand where's the work going to come from, and who's going to help you to do the work. Yeah. So it's all quite logical.
Okay, so you're looking not just for potential customers, but you're looking for the supply chain that you needed to build trusted people around you.
Exactly. So what they told me, in this list, it said you need insurance brokers, landlords, letting agents, emergency 24/7 trades, sort of like emergency plumbers and roofers, because generally they're going to be the first people to get called in. If there's going to be a claim, they'll call them in to help with this mitigation work.
Okay, so
before they
quite
even
often
call the
you're
insurer.
not the first point of call. They'll call a trade in first, and then a trade might
Exactly.
call you into the room.
Exactly. So they said, I need those to do the introduction of work to me. But then you also need the, structural engineers. You need the subsidence engineers. You need the painters, the decorators, the builders. All of those different trades. And so I visited a number of chapters. I think Farnborough was the first one. And I didn't find all of the things that they said I would need on the checklist. No. And so I sort of looked around and I never found a group with all of the things. And also, I think, to be honest, being shielded, if you like, within corporate environment, I didn't understand this concept of networking that we know about in BNI and other networking organizations. I didn't understand that you're not trying to sell to the room, you have to sell through the room. And my mentality was always, well, I don't care if you've got 20 people or 40 people. That's not going to keep me in work, thinking I've only got 40 people to sell to. So I thought, no, it needs to be more of a shotgun approach, get my brand out there a little bit more. And so somebody introduced me to a different networking group. I joined that. Funnily enough, I got a claim from the first meeting that I attended as a member.
So you think you're feeling like you've struck gold, you've walked into a room, hang about, there's some business straight away.
But I did roles like I became an area coordinator for this group, and I think I got one sniff of another claim about 6 months later, but nothing else came of it. And the only reason I came back to BNI was because the WP Healthcare guy in Farnborough, he was also a member of the Farnham group that I was running, of Business Over Breakfast. And he said, hey, you need to be careful, Alan, because you've got a competitor from a company called Asprey sniffing around in Hampshire North looking for a BNI group. And because I was already using all the trades in Farnborough anyway, Farnborough BNI, I thought, okay, when's your next meeting? I'm back in there, I'm signing up. I didn't care that they couldn't give me work, because I just wanted to keep using those guys people. Because I was getting my work still at that stage through yellowpages.com. What I found out later was the fact that obviously I found getting work through my BNI and the whole BNI network was much better in terms of what I was spending and getting back in return from Yellow Pages and Yellow.com. And I just wish that I'd have joined the BNI group when I was told to join it back in 2012.
Just trust the people you've handed 10 grand for your franchise,
exactly.
rather than questioning it.
Just do it. When people have put in place systems, processes, and I think they've been running for probably 20 odd years then. So it's a lot longer now. They've built up a lot of expertise.
So those early days in networking, you go into a room full of people and you're there looking from a sales point of view that, I've either got to generate business. How do relationships start properly from networking?
I think the thing is, and I don't know now whether this is something that I've learned to say because I've found it through experience myself, or whether I've been indoctrinated, or a mixture of both. But I think I've certainly found the proof of the pudding that you don't try to sell. People do not like people, trying to cold call and just try to sell. What you've got to do is try and help people. You've got to come across as being the sort of person that you want to help people all the time. And that's how you develop the relationship.
So we were just talking about selling to the room, going in there, trying to literally milk the room for contacts, and we were just discussing how you start those relationships. You talk about adding value.
So it's all about just seeing if you can help other people. For me, because of the fact that I was getting the work through the yellowpages.com anyway, I was getting a reasonable steady stream of work through that. Then it was easy for me because of the fact I could give work to people in the room. But my B&I journey was such that I probably didn't do what I should have done in terms of promote my own business for 7, 8, 9 months.
Oh, really?
So whilst I was doing a 60 seconds, I didn't put much effort into what do they normally see? VCP, visibility, credibility, profitability. I didn't try to promote myself. I didn't try to, get all of the visibility that I should be, and then backing that up with the credibility. I was just going into the room, doing my 60 seconds, and then having the discussions with the trades and that in the room that I was using for my clients. Yeah. And
becoming a coffee club on a Thursday morning with a few trusted friends, effectively.
Possibly, but we were doing the work. But it was a case of I wasn't getting work from the room or through the room, if you like. Because obviously what you've got to do is build up that confidence. You've got to build up the confidence between everybody in the room. And so it was only when I was asked to do the training, become a director consultant for B&I Hampshire, to do that extra training, when I suddenly realised, oh God, we should have paid attention more to the podcasts and everything to learn a bit more about the process.
Again, there's some systems and processes and education
it's back to that again, isn't it?
You want to do things your own way.
It's exactly the same. It's a case of if somebody tells you to do something, and Concept had a system that they developed over 20 years and it was successful. I mean, how long has B&I been doing it? 40 years. Yeah. And so it's a case of sit down, listen to what they're telling you, and just do it. Don't try and change it.
One of the key concepts of B&I is about spending time with other members of the group that you're in and investing in what they call a one-to-one.
Yeah. Talk
to me about one-to-ones and how you started to use those as...
So one-to-ones, I think before... After doing that training, when I found out a little bit more about all of the processes and all of the things in B&I and what you should be doing, I think the first thing that probably took my focus was the idea of power teams, because I guess I was already involved in what should have been a power team because it's all those trades. So I was involved with property and trades. And the reason why that's important is because probably 2/3 of your business will always come from your power team, which makes sense. So I was doing my one-to-ones, I would say, focused on people within my contact sphere or power team, because that's where I know most of my business is coming from. So it's all about looking for the opportunities and discussing, what you need. Trying to explain your pipeline, where your work comes from, where other people might be able to find it, and how they will benefit then in turn from them finding you work. You will then give it back to them when you're in a property and trades power team, etc. So I think it's all about I think there's different ways you can approach a one-to-one. And again, listening to different podcasts, you'll see people have got different processes. There's a theme I remember Steve used to talk about. What was that called again? Can you remember?
The gains sheet.
The gains sheet, yeah. So it's all about preparing. And at the end of the day, things will always work better when you've got a process in mind. You've got to know and understand what is the process. So with gains, it's a process for preparing for a one-to-one. So if you can go into a one-to-one with another person, having done the preparation, and even providing them with upfront information about you, and you get upfront information about them, straight away you can prepare and understand, this is what they're looking for, and they can do likewise. So it just makes the whole experience a lot quicker, a lot more streamlined, and a lot more productive. But there's additional things that you find out, again, from the different podcasts, different people's experience. I seem to remember someone in the US had said what they normally do is just take their diary into a one-to-one, and then they'll say, right, okay, this is who I've got an appointment with in the next 2 weeks. Is there anybody in this list? Is there anybody in this list who you might find to be an interesting introduction? And if so, train me how I should introduce you into the conversation.
That's a very interesting technique.
Yeah, so again, this is the sort of things that you're taught if you bother.
And is this all happening as part of the meeting, or is this something you're having to put the legwork into outside of the meeting?
So again, preparation. You know, you've got to do the preparation. But in that particular example, where you go in, I guess, with your diary, you've obviously got your diary already, and then the discussion is going to revolve around that diary. Who's important and interesting for the person that you're having a one-to-one with.
Some of the networking groups we met through in the past, you'd have a one-to-one as part of the networking session. You'd have 10-minute, 10-minute one-to-ones.
Yes.
Is 10 minutes enough to build a relationship, or are you doing these one-to-ones outside of the BNI meeting?
No. So when you think about it, a BNI meeting is very visitor-centric. So everything is done to give the benefit to a visitor who's never seen BNI before. They've not been through that experience. And so it's a bit like a shop window.
Okay.
So it's trying to show a prospective member. So a visitor comes in, they want to see what you've got to offer and whether it's something that they want to get involved with and then pay for.
So going back to your days of chasing young ladies, the BNI meeting's a bit like going into the pub and catching somebody's eye, but then you've got to spend the time, actually going out on the date and spending time together to get to know the person. So,
we will normally schedule in one-to-ones or one-to-manys, as we call them as well, because very often you'll because of the fact that you're focusing a lot more on your power teams, you'll have power team meetings anyway. Yep. Because I'll sit there as I'm sort of a bit like what would you call it, a linchpin, and in a power team, I guess I could call my power team just focus rather than call it property and trades. I would just call it insurance claims, building insurance claims, because
you're like the hub of a bicycle wheel.
Exactly,
everything else feeds off
because it's a niche market, if you like, and so. What I need and what all of the power team needs to understand is how does the work flow through that power team?
Yeah.
So if we focus on a niche market, which is solving people with problems who've got building insurance claims, we need to know where the building insurance claims are actually going to come from, how we're going to handle them, and then how do we solve the problems that the claim has caused and fix the damage, etc. And that's one of the things, getting back to the marketing issue with the industry that I'm in, is that most people don't know what a loss assessor is. No. They've never heard of a loss assessor, or they may think it's just the same as a loss adjuster, which means then that if I was to use normal advertising techniques like, websites, search engine optimization,
Google ads, Facebook ads, everything.
People wouldn't know to search for a loss assessor, and every time you come to a new client, they always turn around and said, "My God, I didn't know people like you existed." Why don't people tell us?
So word of mouth marketing is really important for you.
That's why
you've got to educate all those people how you can help them.
Exactly, and so that's why for me, I never focus on the person with a claim. I don't ask for who do you know with a claim. I mean, who's going to be living next door to somebody with a claim? It's silly. It's like searching for a needle in a haystack.
The problem is your referrals and your jobs are totally random when they're going to happen. Going back to it being an act of God, effectively, nothing's predictable. So you've had to build quite a wide area of network connections. So have you travelled about the county? Have you done things on a national basis? How far afield do you tend to network?
So I guess this was another benefit of becoming a DC, because automatically you then become like a bigger cog, if you like, in BNI, in the region, etc. So I get to visit more groups throughout Hampshire, and even wider fields. So you get to substitute and visit other groups as well. I do the national. In fact, we've got the national conference in the Cotswolds coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So that's an opportunity to to also widen your network, if you like.
So we talked about your opportunity to build your supply chain through networking. Have you got any examples of how you've done that in the past?
So I think the first experience I had of this working and thinking, my God, this is a good idea, was actually a claim that was in Bristol. It was a ground floor flat in a block of flats with probably about 8 stories, and it was in Bristol. And what it was, they'd had a problem with a soil, communal soil pipe from all the flats above.
Sounds like a delightful job.
Oh,
to
it was. I've not had another one similar, but it was not nice. And what it was, this couple had been away only for about long weekend, I think it was, like 3 nights or something, and they came back, opened the door to such a mess. I mean, I think the only room that escaped was the one in the far corner. As you go into the front door, it's a long hallway. There was a bedroom on the right. There was a utility room with a sink and a washing machine on the left. There was a bathroom there. There was a lounge over there.
I can just imagine a bodysuit and a face mask, a bit like a crime scene.
And it was like water, sewage, toilet paper, you name it. It was all over the place. But what I did was I arranged to do a survey visit because it had been described to me as to what it was like. So I was already a B&I member at that stage. So I was like, okay, let me have a look and see what B&I's got.
Yeah.
So I went on the B&I website and I found, I think it was called B&I Compton, and they were meeting at that stage in the boardroom of the Bristol City football ground, I think it was. And so I could see what sort of members they had. So I knew who I was going to be looking for during and after the meeting. And so what I did was I found out when their next meeting was, and I arranged to do the survey visit with the client on the day before. And so I drove over there. I checked into the hotel overnight. I did the survey visit, knew exactly what I needed, some of the damage, did the survey, etc. Stayed in the hotel. Next morning, sat in at the B&I meeting, and then I said at the end of the meeting, can I have a word with you, and you, and you? And thankfully, they had a painter and decorator in the group who was also an ex-project manager.
Okay.
And so I just asked him to manage it remotely for me.
Okay.
And the only trade, if you like, that they didn't have was one of the companies that does where they bring in the initial mitigation work with the drying contractor. But thankfully, I had a member of my Bob, who I was still running Bob groups as well, even though I was in B&I, at least to start with. I think they were Southern Region manager for a drying contractor. So he told me that they got an operator actually in Bristol. So I'd already got that in place, which was good. And so
you used it as a toolbox, to complete the job.
Exactly, yeah. And so they did a fantastic job. And all that happened then is when the job was finished, I was in constant communication with them. They were sending me photos and stuff as how it was progressing. And then I just did a follow-up visit at the end to sign it all off, and it went really well.
So what would you say is the most common mistake you see people make when it comes to making an insurance claim or starting off this process of, disasters happen for this couple, they've come back from holiday, the house, I mean, your wife or partner would just be hysterical and in tears, the condition of the place. What's the biggest mistake that people start to make when dealing with an insurance claim?
So there are, I guess the thing is you have to wind back. The biggest mistake I've already suggested is when they select the policy, because the policy that they selected is going to have a big bearing on how the claim is handled. Okay. So if put that one aside, because now we've actually hit the point where there is a disaster. And I would say it's things like if they've got a water leak and they've got a stain in the ceiling, if they don't take initial actions like making sure that there's an escape route for the water, if they've got an ongoing claim, I always say if somebody calls me up and saying, look, you've got a stain that's getting worse than the ceiling, one thing you have to do is probably fine hole in through the plasterboard and the ceiling with a big bin or bucket,
so it doesn't
or
turn
something.
into a massive bubble.
Exactly, because if they don't do that, you'll just end up with the ceiling
Losing the whole
collapsing.
ceiling.
So that's one of the initial things. It's also going to be things like maybe electrical safety checks. So there's all that initial safety stuff that they need to be aware of, to be honest. And I guess the experience that they have will depend on who they call in first. Sometimes I've also found that when trades come in first, they'll go, liquor paint, but they haven't thought about things like, is there asbestos, building drying, etc.
The small trades quite often don't have to get involved massively in CDM and all the other building regulations and health and safety things that a larger construction project would deal with. Your average painter and decorator would not so much ignore them, but just not come into contact with them quite as much. Whereas you have to deal with all of that as the kind of principal contractor involved in the claim.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well, what I've seen is where people, they've got to put something together. So the insurance company, and again, it depends on who the insurer is, who the loss adjuster is, the type of client you are, etc., whether your class is high net worth, etc. If you're not high net worth, you probably get a worse deal, because the insurance company won't see you as valuable as others. Yeah. So what tends to happen is when they get the insurance company involved in the claim up front, so that's the first thing they do. They've got the policy document there. They can see a number. I've got to call these. I've got a claim. So they call them. So straight away, they're in the insurance company's net. And from that point, they can trip themselves up, say what they shouldn't do.
Well, the insurance company's there and pushing their own agenda.
Yeah, well, exactly. And the thing is, I find there are a lot of policyholders. They can start talking about stuff which they shouldn't do, which is not related to the claim, but just because they've said it, it gives a loss adjuster or an insurer to start drawing the wrong conclusion to what's been said, and therefore they suggest something which might be, sounds like you've got pre-existing condition, then we don't cover that, or all that damage is something historical, when it's not even related. If you actually do all the right tests and see what the root causes are in each case, you'll say, there's nothing to do with that.
You do quite a lot of investigation into
you
things
do.
when
You
you
do,
have
because
a claim.
the thing is that when a loss adjuster turns up, I mean, I had one guy say this to me. He said, "My God, you're very thorough on what you're doing there with thermal imaging camera and moisture meter." He said the guy who came in before you from the insurance company, all he had was his mobile phone and took pictures. He didn't have anything to check moisture or anything like that.
I remember you showing me some pictures of a flat that had some problems, and within weeks the flat had been literally stripped out to a carcass.
That's the one, Eltham Heath. That was exactly the one. That's where it started, and it was an issue. It was a ground floor flat. The upstairs flat had a wet room that had been installed not that long before. And whilst the upstairs resident was away shopping or something, there was I think it was a push fit connector that failed. And then there was all this water gushing down into the bathroom of the flat below. Luckily, a lot of it was already going into the bath, but some of it wasn't. Some of it was going outside the bath. But what they didn't know was some of it was going down inside the stud wall, behind the tiles.
So you wouldn't see that with a mobile phone and a camera.
You wouldn't see that. And then what happened was the structure of the property was such that there was iron J beams, so it was structured timber, and it was iron J beams, and there was like loft insulation that was underneath the floor. So it was.
And water's never going to disperse from that.
Well,
once
exactly.
It's like
that's
a soggy
that's where it was soaking. So
it.
all the water, unbeknown to everybody, was going down behind the tiled wall and underneath into that loft insulation.
So what could start out as being some redecoration and possibly a new plasterboard ceiling and a few other bits, before you know it, how far did you strip that property back?
Well, because of the fact it was left so long, the flooring was all rotting because all that moisture was sitting trapped inside that loft insulation. All of the timber flooring was rotting, and it collapsed. And the only thing that was keeping some of it up was the fact that the vinyl floor covering in the bathroom was actually celastic to the skirting board, and the toilet was sort of sitting leaning over. There was a lot of rust inside, like on the radiator, etc., next to the toilet and the bath, because it was a steel bath, and there was all this brown residue coming, sitting on the tile grout. And the loss adjuster just took photos and said to the guy, well, the rust on your radiator is because your young lad's probably been weeing on the radiator, and that's what's caused that.
Yeah.
And all of this residue that you can see on your tiles, that's because you failure of sealant and grout. It's poor maintenance.
Yeah.
But what had happened was, it wasn't the fact that they hadn't maintained the grout and the shower water was penetrating that way into the wall.
Yeah.
It was because it was all coming out.
Absorbing through.
It was all coming the other way, and so when we actually found the extent of the damage, it started off that we had half of the length of the property. We had to remove all of that flooring. So all of the stud work came out, everything
all the
was
internal
out.
walls,
Kitchen
the
was all
carpets
gone.
out.
There was nothing there. Carpets out, internal walls, bathroom out, utility cupboard out, and the kitchen was all out. And it was only once we got half of the floor out, we could see underneath through the gap in the soldier walls that it was also the same in the lounge and the 2 bedrooms.
So this water just penetrated all the way down the wall like a sponge, and then through underneath the floor.
Exactly.
So the householder thinks, oh yeah, I'm going to have a new bathroom, and it had a brand new flat by the time you finished. By the sound of it,
It was, yeah. The only thing that stayed in situ, which was because of the fact it was supporting wall. It had a double thick stud wall. So the double thickness of plasterboard on each side of the stud wall that went down the spine.
Yeah.
And because that was sitting on a soldier wall, and there was like a DPC there, that was okay. So we could leave that in situ. But the floors on either side had to come out, and because all of the stud walls were sitting on that floor, then
so that's a major project. So from that lead that a builder might have passed you, that there's a plumbing leak, or a plumber might have passed you, you end up with a major construction project. That's not a few weeks' work.
No, it wasn't.
So the householder knows that you've gone in, you've done a thorough job. They know that their claim's going to be dealt with in a professional way. But the problem is, where they're going to live.
That was the other issue, because their claim was initially repudiated. And they knew then there was an issue, because it wasn't only the bathroom that was affected. They could see also the kitchen was a problem, which was on the other side of the stud wall, the bath tiled wall. And they had a big American fridge freezer right in that corner, which was also tilting.
Crikey.
And there was doors that weren't closing properly. So
there were signs that it was going to be a major thing.
Yeah, so there were signs, and they knew that if it was as bad as we thought, then
it was going to be a major claim.
It was going to be major, and they didn't know where they were going to live, because the claim was initially repudiated.
Crikey.
And it did take a number of weeks toing and froing with the insurance company. I think they eventually called in a different loss adjuster on their side. They got rid of one and then appointed another one, and the negotiation with them was a bit more successful than the previous one.
So what do you do for them when it comes to making sure they've got somewhere to live and a quality of life? Because they shouldn't be out of pocket for a neighbour's burst pipe.
So what depends again on the insurance company that's involved. Each insurance company will tend to have a designated company that they will use to identify suitable alternative accommodation.
Is that a case of they lived out of a Premier Inn for 18 months? Or?
No. They had a like-for-like flat.
Okay.
So they had a proper house.
Yeah.
And I think it was on a 12-month rental.
So they've got a level of security there. Well, the kids can still go to school and they can live.
When you think about the cost of the claim to the insurer, if you add up the cost of the reinstatement works, which would have been not that much short of 100,000, you probably had 12 months rental on top of that and a few other costs. So you're talking about somewhere between, it would have been over £150,000.
Yeah.
And they obviously sort of wondering, my goodness, what would have happened if they hadn't have got this sorted out? Yeah. They would have had nowhere to live. They would have not been able to afford it to put the property back to how it should be, because they couldn't afford to pay 150.
That's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And all of that came down to, using a loss assessor and having a good understanding of the policy and what you are able to push through to kind of protect your client.
A lot of people say, and I think policyholders have got wide to this now, is the fact that insurance companies will just keep kicking the can down the road. And all they're doing it for is to hope that you'll just give up in despair at some stage. We've got a claim at the moment was given to me by the current president of B&I. I think it's the Branch Group in Basingstoke, who's does mortgages, and it's subsidence claim. Luckily it's only the porch that's affected, so the house itself has been okay. But when it came to me, when I was asked if I can help, it had already had the insurance company kicking can down the road for about 3.5 years.
Oh, crikey.
Yeah, 3.5 years. And the policyholder was telling me, they sort of do something. They'll do a little bit, but then it all goes quiet again.
Yeah.
And then about 6 months later, she has to chase and say, well, what's happening now? What's happening? And so we've now got the stage now where we've had the insurance company come out. They sent their surveyor out to do what's like a party wall agreement and do photographs. And what we've agreed to is that their contractor will do the demolition to remove the old porch. And then they've got a company called Shire's coming in doing a base. And then our own contractor will go in and install a new porch.
The finished article. So over the years, what have you found has been the biggest challenge in running your own business? Because you've gone from that corporate world, you've taken the franchise on, you then years later left the kind of safety net of a franchise. What would you say has been the biggest challenge to you to either grow the business or something you just hadn't been used to?
To be honest, I don't think I've ever been in a position where I've been concerned about whether the company will survive. So, and I don't know if that's because of the fact that going down the franchise route has given me firm foundations, so I fully understand what to do and how to do it.
And you'd adopted a 20-year proven model.
Yeah, exactly. Or whether it's decisions about, going down the B&I route and then doing that extra training and then saying, okay, it does work, let's do it properly now.
Yeah.
And then realising that the simple formula, I know it's not a formula, VCP, VCP. So whether it was just a case of saying, well, let's just follow that, I think it's probably going to work, and it certainly does work. But it is all about visibility. You've got to get your brand out there, get people to know you. Or whether it's also potentially the fact that there's not much competition as well. Mm-hmm. So I've chosen an industry where I don't think there's another person that does what I do in Hampshire, not just Hampshire North, but also Hampshire South. And I know there was one in Hampshire South who, funnily enough, joined Concept. And I tried to reach out to them sometime last year when I heard they were struggling. Yeah. But then I do know for a fact that when I was mentoring some of the guys, they really did struggle understanding whether it's what to do, how to do it. etc., or just the way they approach things. I don't know. I remember getting a call. I was out in London with my wife one afternoon, and I'd had an American chap who's from a building background when he came from the US, but all he knew was steelworks. When I took him out for a visit to a client's property, and I was talking about skirting boards, he didn't seem to understand the terminology of skirting boards. But I remember, as I say, this afternoon I was out in a garden centre somewhere in London, and I had this call from this chap, and it was probably a few months after I set him free into his own territory. And he said, Alan, he said, I'm really struggling at the moment. He said, not only can I not convince policyholders that I can support them and what I can do, they just think I'm scamming them. He said, I'm also struggling to find the trades who believe in what I'm doing. They also think I'm scamming them.
Yeah.
And so he was in an unfortunate position where he joined the franchise when it was costing over £30,000 to do it.
And that's a massive.
It's a massive amount,
burden, yeah.
and he didn't have the money also to support, the point in time where he's going through. He's made the purchase, he's doing his training, he's setting everything up. He needs some amount of money to support him for at least probably 3 to 6 months.
He probably needs £100,000 startup fund to get going.
So he took that out as a loan, whereas I didn't need that.
Yeah.
So straight away, he's on a back foot. He's also paying more in monthly fees for franchise fees.
Yeah.
He's paying more for his FCA compliance. He's paying a loan back. So I can understand why some of these guys were actually struggling.
It's a difficult position to be in sometimes. And some of the franchises, massive overhead. And for people that are new to business, that can add a massive pressure to them from day one.
Exactly.
So tell me, have you ever made a serious mistake in business? Is there anything that you think to yourself, God, I wish I hadn't made that mistake, apart from not starting your networking journey a little bit earlier? Is there anything you look back and think, do you know what, I really have messed up on that one?
I can't think. I mean, the only one that I would keep on continuing and kicking myself in the backside for was not doing a proper job with the networking from day one, because that would have
Transformed things
made a
that
big
much,
big difference.
Because you'd invested a lot of time and energy into freewheeling through networking to an extent.
Yeah, because as I say, the thing is, I know we talk about things like lifestyle businesses, but even I came to it with that level of mentality because, I'm not young. I've got no desire to run a £1 million business, and I didn't need to. I just wanted to be able to continue with the lifestyle that I've got, and not have to work too hard.
So the next question that I was going to kind of round off with is that through all these podcasts and all the people I've interviewed, there's an expression from Zig Ziglar back in the 1970s was that you were born to win, but to win you need to plan to win, envision that you're going to win, and prepare to win, go out and be successful. And for me, every single person I meet has the potential to be successful in whatever they do, as long as they put their mind to it. Mm-hmm. But you've had a great corporate career. You've had a great 12, 13 years with your franchise business and going out there building what you needed to build to maintain that lifestyle. And both of us have been able to go off and enjoy conferences around the world and different things like that. But what does success look like for you in the next 5 years? What's the next thing that...
Well, what's taking most of my time up at the moment, even when I was just doing the networking, the B&I stuff and conferences and that, people used to say to me, how have you got time to run your business? How do you do that? And then I got roped into joining Neighbourhood Watch. So I came in as a deputy coordinator for Camberley for Surrey Heath Neighbourhood Watch, and then I got pulled aside. I don't even know how it happened. Suddenly I became chairman of Surrey Heath, and then probably less than 12 months later, the chap who used to run Surrey was emigrating to the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
And so he asked me if I would step into his shoes, which I did last September, I think it was. So I'm sort of being pulled into different things now. And the other thing I didn't realise is I after a month or so of being in the role of chair of Surrey, I found out, oh, by the way, didn't Martin tell you that in this role you were also on the committee for Crime Stoppers?
Yeah.
No. Oh, there you go. This is the role.
So that skill of building relationships has taken you in totally different directions, into different experiences that you never would have put your hand up for.
Exactly. So I think now I'm into the area of it's a bit more voluntary stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that I like, I sort of like it. I sort of like it's a bit like giving back.
Yeah.
Because maybe it's
there's
just
no other agenda apart from to do good, is there?
Yeah, maybe it's the age thing again. But I think I've always had a kick out of helping people with the insurance claims, especially those who I've considered to be either elderly or vulnerable, because I've been shocked at the way they've been treated on occasions, to be honest. So I've always sort of enjoyed that. That's the one thing I've tended to give myself a pat on the back from time to time. But the other thing I also got roped into more recently was something called Probus Clubs, because I already consider myself as basically semi-retired anyway.
Yeah.
So Probus Clubs is for retired or semi-retired business owners, professionals, etc. So that's been fun to be doing that once a month. But I seem to be the toy boy in the group. So I think I am the youngest one, even though I'm 67. I'm the youngest one in the group of about 30 odd people. I think it is over 30 people. And we have a lunch every month at Camberley Heath Golf Club, which is good. We have a good talk, etc. A good speaker as well. So we just had the AGM meeting actually this week. So that's the next thing that I want to take on, is try to grow that group. So it's a case of supporting Neighbourhood Watch and trying to grow that, Crime Stoppers and also Probus. But I do need to be mindful of what's happening with my business, which is why
it can be easy to be distracted from.
It is, and so what I've taken the step now. I've thought about, do I franchise the business? I got turned off by the experience of Matt and a few others as well. So I've decided not to do that. I don't want to employ people. But I suddenly thought, well, why don't I just bring on another director? Because there is somebody who's in our B&I who's interested in learning the business. Because kept saying, well, when are you retiring? I'll buy your business off you. And I thought, well, do I want to sell the business? Because it does support the lifestyle thing. So do I really want to stop doing what I'm doing? But it would be a good idea to bring on another director to actually then train up and then get them to start doing more. And I can probably step back and just take care of the compliance bit. So I'll continue with all the compliance.
So that initial skill set, all the way through your career of quality control, quality assurance, paperwork, and all the mundane bits that other people hate.
Well, exactly,
can become your Friday afternoon job through retirement to keep your travel
and then
funded.
I'll just keep on with helping out the Neighbourhood Watch and the Probus and the Crime Stoppers, etc.
So wrapping things up, how would we generate a referral for you, Alan? What do we need to look out for? Who do we need to talk to be able to generate a referral for you?
Well, it's the introducers. As I say, I already mentioned, I don't go looking for people with claims, so I don't need to be introduced to anybody with a claim. So it's not a case of having what do you call it, golden geese, golden eggs, golden referrals. So it's a case of landlords, letting agents, and emergency trades. And I guess any of those who operate in and around Surrey, Hampshire and Berkshire.
And where can they come and meet you?
They can meet me. I tend to spend a lot of time in the Login Business Lounge, so they're more than welcome to come and visit me there. Or probably any B&I meeting. So if they want to come to a B&I meeting, you know, if they're a letting agent or a trade, etc., they could always come to the Farnborough Masonic Centre on a Friday morning, which is where we've been this morning.
Fantastic.
For a B&I meeting.
And where will we find you online to get in contact with you, Alan?
So www.mypropertyclaim with no s.co.uk.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for your time today, Alan. Really enjoyed talking to you all about the insurance industry and how to manage our property claims.
No problem. Thank you.